Hello, I'm Peter Butcher. The following presentation will explore the psychological, behavioural and creative processes involved in changing core beliefs. The term core beliefs refers to learned, deeply held, partly unconscious beliefs about the self and existence. These beliefs are fundamentally important in helping us find meaning and purpose in life and gaining a sense of who we are and our place in the universe. In what follows, I will draw largely on examples from my own experience, but will begin with an example from theoretical physics. To change long-held core beliefs in physics, Einstein thought about the building blocks of existence, like time, mass, and energy, and how they related holistically with one another. He used careful observation, imagination, and speculation, combined with inspiration, logic, and mathematics, and came to a formulation, his now famous equation and theory of relativity. In his own way, Einstein joined influential thinkers like Darwin and Freud, who introduced radical new concepts that changed deeply held beliefs about who we are and our place in a familiar universe. However, even changing much less complicated beliefs often proves extremely difficult. This is the case even when the beliefs are not valued or helpful. For example, I struggled at school and failed the 11+, when shortly after I moved with my family to Tasmania and resettled in school, my performance remained mediocre. As a result, with little or no belief in my abilities, I left school at 15 to work as a wall sorter. In my early 20s, however, I wondered if, by hard work, I could do better. As a test, more in hope than expectation, I took evening classes and eventually gained mature age entry to university. There, I majored in philosophy and psychology, did a fourth-year honours degree in psychology, followed by postgraduate training in clinical psychology. In the process, a core belief about my low academic ability was changed through new experiences and academic achievements. In many cases, open-mindedness and curiosity play an important role in changing core beliefs. I once chanced upon a book on a subject I'd not come across before. The Way of Zen made me realize just how limited my Western way of thinking was in truly making sense of myself and the world. I didn't understand everything I read, but here was a totally different way of thinking, with important insights that have continued to influence my beliefs about myself and the nature of existence. Zen originated in an ancient form of Chinese Buddhism known as Shen. Unlike other forms of Buddhism, Shen was unique in being strongly influenced by Taoist philosophy, with its emphasis on oneness, or the union of opposites, and the concept of the way. The way is a universal, interrelated process of harmony and oneness, which exists within the natural world and is considered the path that all humans should follow. Here we see Taoist philosophers contemplating harmony and oneness. According to Zen, to fully understand and follow the way, the mind must free itself from a number of developmental and culturally conditioned beliefs. To do this, Zen Buddhists practice long periods of sitting and walking meditation. The 13th century Zen master Dogen summarized the first step in the way of Zen as follows: "The study of the way is the study of the self." During my 6 years training in psychology, I had many opportunities to study the self. One particular influence in my clinical training involved group sessions with a psychotherapist known for his unconventional approaches. He placed particular emphasis on the therapist and the patient learning to follow the feeling, tapping into physical sensations centered around the solar plexus. In one group discussion, the topic aroused in me a feeling of being trapped, and when I mentioned this, he immediately replied, "I've just the thing for you." Standing up to reach behind a filing cabinet, he pulled out a large axe handle. He asked me to stand and close my eyes while we both held the axe handle across my chest. I then had to shout, "Let me out! Let me out!" while he forcibly pushed me against the wall. This provoked an instant rush of anxiety and vivid images regressing backward in time. The first image came from a frightening initiation at work when I was buried in a huge vat of wool, unable to move or breathe. The next was a recurring childhood nightmare where I'm pulled into a bottomless black pit by a suffocating monster. The nightmare was associated with Moaning Minnie, the eerie air raid siren that sounded throughout my first 3 years of life. The final image was surprisingly positive. I'm in the house where I was born and lived until the end of the war. I'm sitting in the kitchen inside a tiny open cupboard, hugging my knees, feeling safe and at one with the world. On finishing university, I moved back to Britain and began work in London as a cognitive behaviour therapist, helping people change beliefs and behaviours that reinforced anxiety or depression. Also feeling a strong draw to making sculpture, particularly stone carving, I joined twice-weekly evening classes. There, my first attempt at carving stone focused on themes of oneness and the union of opposites. On completing this figure, I felt it should evolve into a circle of beings that separate and reunite. First of all, transforming into an Earth Mother who gives birth to an androgynous child that grows to adulthood, divides and completes the circle. Shortly after starting the circle of figures, a sudden end of a romantic relationship triggered in me an emotional loss of deeply valued beliefs about life and relationships. The 14th century poet Geoffrey Chaucer, in just 2 lines of Middle English, captures feelings and questions raised by loss of meaningful beliefs. What is the world? What asketh men to have? Now with his love, now in his cold grave. During a major crisis of personal belief in 1897, the artist Paul Gauguin summed up the thoughts troubling his mind with a large, complex painting he entitled, "Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going?" Asking similar questions, I found my circle of figures no longer reflected the inner chaos I was feeling. Intuitively, I attempted to resolve this the only way I knew. Having already carved a figure of a half-child, half-woman, the changeling, I now pictured her inside the circle with other figures facing difficult life changes and standing with effigies that symbolized distressed or conflicted states of mind. Still feeling mentally unmoored and in need of something positive to anchor myself, I conceived a new sculpture to be placed at the centre. My strategies of following the feeling and making sculpture were crucial steps in not losing my way. They helped me stay grounded mentally, to process the experience positively, and to find new meaning and purpose in life. They also illustrate the way intuition and creativity play an important role in resolving a crisis of belief. Anthropologists have found that descriptions of disorientation, chaos, threat and terror, as well as a quest for resolution, are universal in the initiation ceremonies and mythical narratives of Stone Age cultures. In a rite of passage, the initiate undergoes a dramatic, emotionally distressing and often physically painful ordeal. This is designed to teach and instill important new existential and spiritual beliefs. Through this process, the initiate journeys from one state of being to another and learns to understand the true nature of their life and existence. In this process, they encounter and have to pass a powerful manifestation from the spirit world. The myths of Stone Age hunter-gatherer and simple agrarian cultures often describe a winding, challenging life journey from and return to the source or creative centre of their universe. Here is a drawing of the Hopi Mother Earth from which the tribe emerged into this world. According to the elders in the Book of the Hopi, the passages within the maze form the plan which man must follow on his road of life. Similar symbolism appears in the myths of more advanced cultures whose narratives describe a life journey from and back to the centre of a labyrinth or maze. Here is an ancient coin found in Knossos, site of the mythical Cretan labyrinth. Entering the labyrinth, the mythical hero faces terrifying monsters which bar the way. If these are defeated, he finds something of great value that was lost. On reaching the centre, Theseus slays the Minotaur and wins back Ariadne. Over the centuries, maze and labyrinth symbols have been incorporated into the spiritual and religious thinking of many cultures. If you pass through the doors of Chartres Cathedral in France, you immediately enter a 12th century maze. Here the visitor or pilgrim can enact their own journey to and from the spiritual source. In Uccello's 15th century Italian depiction of St. George, St. Martha and the dragon, the knight has passed through a maze and is shown killing an evil dragon in order to win back the beautiful St. Martha. Note also the strange dark spiralling cloud in the upper right corner of the painting. The same inward spiral path to enlightenment and renewal is shown illustrated in a 19th century copy of John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. By looking closely at the illustration, you can see that on approach to the centre, the pilgrim has to be baptised in the river of death in order to be reborn and allowed to enter the celestial city. There is even a very ancient children's game of hopscotch, where, as shown in my contemporary recreation, the player hops in a spiral and has to jump over the square labelled hell in order to reach heaven at the centre. For some years I kept a dream diary. After that difficult breakup, I frequently dreamed of making a dangerous journey. For example, in the first week I dreamt of trying to get somewhere important through a maze of locked rooms. I arrive at a beach from which I can swim to another shore. However, before entering the water, it's disturbed by a terrifying black serpent. In the next of the series, a monster emerges from a black pool on the beach and attacks me. In 3 final dreams, I'm out in the water, dive to the seabed, retrieve a beautiful figurine, and swim to the other shore. In the last dream, I'm caught up in a joyous celebration. In another example of the recurring dreams, I start climbing a high mountain, then realise I'm not equipped for the challenge. However, in later dreams, I slowly but finally ascend to the summit. A notable feature of dreams at this time was also recurring images of harmony and centering. One particularly powerful example is half waking 3 times, arms and legs outspread with a powerful force holding me physically in position. Each time I wake, a voice in my head is saying, "The centre is very near," or "I must stay near the centre." There is also a strong feeling around my solar plexus, with my navel at its centre. Sometime prior to this dream, I had seen this illustration purportedly showing the point where opposites unite harmoniously within the human form. In the past, I had also seen reproductions of Leonardo's Vitruvian Man, his drawing of ideal bodily proportions, perfection and harmony. No doubt my dream was inspired by these 2 Vitruvian figures, tapping into my strong connection to the solar plexus and symbols of the centre. Together with the other dreams at this time, it could have been no more than random, unconscious recollections and associations. While possible, this interpretation fails to account for the way the dreams at this time appear actively, intentionally, and inventively to provide helpful warnings and guidance. Does this suggest that the unconscious acts as an intuitive guide and creative influence during a crisis of belief? Was the Taoist master Chuang Tzu right to suggest that we all have an invisible protector who acts unconsciously? Or is it simply that the psyche, as a dynamic system, is trying to rebalance and reset itself as part of an innate survival mechanism? Whatever the answer to these questions, the Vitruvian dream led directly to a number of completely different creative activities, beginning with my first performance art. Some months later, I held a teaching afternoon on themes of change and dream symbols for the psychology department and invited guests, including a presentation from 2 artists. On the day, I performed associations to a dream symbol, accompanied by a short video. In one sequence, the video follows me walking through Hampton Court Maze to the centre. In another scene, I fly a kite depicting an image of a Vitruvian man. In the final scene, I sit hugging my knees and open my mouth to reveal a golden circle. The same year at Delphi, the site the Greeks considered the navel of the world and dedicated to the Earth Mother, I held aloft a symbol of birth and rebirth, walked in a spiral toward the centre, illustrated harmony and oneness in the form of a Vitruvian man, represented rebirth, and returned to the everyday world. The following year, I used symbols of oneness and rebirth in other artworks, including a performance in Rose Garrard's 1977 London exhibition at the Acme Gallery, and a photo collage exhibited at the Whitechapel Gallery in 1985. An offshoot of these and other activities was an invitation in 1992 to join Platform, an interdisciplinary group working to re-establish our relation to nature, the city and the lost rivers of London. Working with artist Nick Stewart, we created several public events over the River Walbrook, now a storm drain 30 feet below street level. In one event, I took water trickling from the storm drain and distilled it at the Walbrook's approximate source beside Liverpool Street Station. Later, walking the length of the Walbrook, I carried the water and Nick dressed in a shroud. In another action, Nick used the water at one site over the Lost River, and I semaphored an SOS on Walbrook Street, where the river once ran to the Thames. Making a video, exploring performance art, using photo collage, and working with others were all new experiments confirming my belief in trying something new. Returning briefly to my dreams, as the crisis resolved itself, I was surprised to start dreaming of gradually gaining the power of flight. This symbol of transcendence and renewal is mostly depicted in dreams and myth as a bird or a birdman. Here, a Native American birdman performs a celebratory ceremonial dance, and in this ancient pictograph from Easter Island, a crouching birdman illustrates the union of opposites, rebirth and transcendence. The engraving records an important public event. When spring came, young men swam a challenging stretch of water to an offshore island where seabirds nested. The first man to return safely with an egg was elected Birdman of the Year. In this photograph of a Krakautal tribal totem, the thunderbird is seen transcending negative and threatening forces perched on the head of a legendary ogress. The birdman also represents the transition from one state of being to another. For example, here the birdman crosses the water and leads the chieftain to his bride in order to complete the union of opposites in marriage. Inspired by dreams of flight, I made an artwork in which a birdman spirals out from a symbolic centre and tree of life. This illustrates the connection between oneness, transcendence, and the transition from winter to spring. For another time-based public artwork, I combined the symbols of flight, the centre, and the circle. The myths and ceremonies of primitive cultures reflect intuitive, imaginative ways of making sense of their world and themselves. Today, confronted by deeply puzzling situations or experiences, we predominantly employ rational thought to understand or make them meaningful. Research with fMRI brain scans shows that this logical processing is carried out largely by the left hemisphere of the brain. However, as this illustration indicates, emotional experiences tend to be processed by the right hemisphere using holistic perception, intuitive, non-verbal, emotional thought, and creative imagination. This way of processing powerful emotional experiences may hold the key to the psychological changes seen in, for example, primitive initiation ceremonies, a crisis of personal belief, and in psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. Intuitive emotional thought, holistic perception, and creative imagination are deeply embedded in the ancient structure of the human psyche. A few years ago, I came across this figure. It was carved 40,000 years ago, a time when we still shared the world with Neanderthals. Currently the oldest known sculpture, the Lion Man inspired me to carve a piece linking primeval awareness and intuition with a present-day union of opposites. I called it Dancing in Time, 40,000 years. Research shows that primitive cultures have also used circles to link oneness with places of origin or creation. For example, this symbolism appears in the art and storytelling of Australian Aborigines. And their origin or dreamtime stories frequently show the world, their tribe and all other living creatures originating from the creative centre of a circle. Here we can see the circle in the actual process of expanding from the centre. This photo collage shows my world being turned upside down with the loss of meaningful core beliefs. As illustrated earlier, to enter an inner world empty of meaning is psychologically threatening. A failure to find new beliefs is terrifying. This terror is often described as being devoured in order to be reborn. When on a quest to find what to believe, Jonah is swallowed by a whale. This Etruscan vase painting depicts Jason being disgorged by a monster guarding the prized golden fleece. The newly reborn Jason falls at the feet of the goddess Athena, who holds or presents her bird companion, symbol of transcendence and wisdom. In searching for new beliefs, I encountered my own self-devouring monster. In a particularly dark period, my worst experience was the sense that this monster was in my head, devouring both itself and devouring me. Fortunately for me, however, the Birdman appears. He confronts and eventually overcomes this creature of many forms and nightmares. Furthermore, the monster is not only overcome, but embraced in a gesture of oneness. The Birdman is now like Janus, Roman god of doorways and portals, seeing both within and without at the same time. Here, he also displays to the world the circuitous path to the centre, the source of creation, oneness and rebirth, that reveals the child within. The child who becomes the companion of the Birdman, the one who has overcome adversity and holds the key to transformative rebirth. To conclude this survey of the way core beliefs are changed, I'll start with some words from Dogen Zenji. The study of the way is the study of the self. The study of the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be awakened by all myriad things. Dogen's statement, to study the self is to forget the self, appears paradoxical. Having a self is a very deeply held core belief. However, in Zen, the self is not viewed as a separate thing from all other things. It's part of a universal process, or the way, an ever-changing, interrelated, interwoven state of being or interbeing. The Zen concepts of no self and interbeing explain where we come from, what we are, and where we're going. By forgetting the self, we see into our true nature as part of everything else. This is why to forget the self is to be awakened by all myriad things. Before becoming self-aware or having a sense of our own identity, we do not distinguish between the world and ourself. This distinction develops around 18 months in humans. If this boy, having just seen himself, is looking a little quizzical, it may be because he's only 12 months old. As self-awareness develops, it becomes both a gift and a curse. A gift because to distinguish one thing from another is the foundation of logical thinking, ordered planning, systematic problem-solving, science and mathematics. A curse because this mindset becomes habitual. We mostly think dualistically about everything. However, according to Zen, we can change this mindset any time we want by forgetting the self and being awakened to our interconnectedness with all things. This oneness is difficult to describe and probably best illustrated with words and images. Being within a world, the birth of Lao Tzu from nature, the newborn, and the beatific sandboy. To sum up, Zen philosophy involves learning that there is no separate self or no division between the self and the world. In this state of mind, you see into your true nature and that you are the world. You see where you come from, what you are, and where you're going. You renew your relation with the world and your true self. You are awakened by all myriad things.